Sit down at the bar, my friends. We've got a late night edition with Dr. Dragelin on deck. Let's go. I'm excited to announce that we are back yet again. So that makes this an important time to quote the great logician, Lil Chano, we back.
Hey, Jason, thanks so much for having me back, man. It's awesome to be
What's
here.
up, my man? Let's do this. Hey, what'd you choose to drink tonight? I don't know yet.
Yeah, so I didn't tell you yet. I heard a little bit of a rumor about what you had going on, but I went with a mint julep, actually. Just classic. Been really digging the mint recently this season, just kind of like all things mint. It's been a nice, refreshing, like summer thing. And yeah, so just threw in a little bourbon with it, and it's been pretty good so far.
No, that's awesome. What I'm going with tonight is a special edition. So I'll bring this one a little closer because Linkoya was nice enough to hook us up with glasses for tonight's show. Linkoya is an awesome restaurant right on the lake here in Hendersonville. Alec, have you been there yet?
Very cool. I have not, no. I've seen you post about it, though.
Yeah, we've done a few times in a row, like back-to-back nights. It's kind of been a thing lately. The girls love it. They got an Etch-a-Sketch, hooks them up, and the Philly's incredible. The shrimp and grits is incredible. Really? But this is their Peninsula Punch. And Peninsula Punch, I got it the first time and felt like this is a big risk. But now it's like, this could be my go-to summer drink now.
Okay.
The thing about a punch, do you know what defines a punch?
My guess would be my off the bat reaction is like multiple types of fruit. But that's probably the best of what I have to guess.
I am definitely supposed to already know this answer, so I am going to default to our wonderful and beautiful co-producer tonight, Miss Cassie Hulme. What's in a punch? Okay, so it is punch means 5. So there's 5 ingredients, and they are citrus, has to have a citrus, a sugar, an alcohol, water, and a spice or tea.
Interesting. So I think the spice, the citrus, I think those other things I could have guessed are part of it, but I think the spice is probably the sleeper ingredient there.
So I definitely gave you a chance to flex your alcohol knowledge out of nowhere, and I did not know that a punch mattered any of that. I just thought high C, and it's like a bunch of flavors.
Yeah, honestly, like red. Hawaiian punch.
Yeah, and I really brought it up because your shirt tonight is flexing hard as far as a beach vibe and a very weekend vibe for Thursday night. So I'm in.
Yeah. Just I kind of figured just kind of lay loose. Went to Jack Brown's tonight. Have you ever been to Jack Brown's?
No, I've never even heard of it.
Yeah, so Jack Brown's, it's in Germantown, in Nashville, and went there. It's because it's Burger Week in Nashville. So a bunch of different restaurants, burger joints are doing like a specialty burger, I guess, for a competition. And so we had the Jack Brown's specialty burger tonight, socially distanced, of course. And yeah, it was kind of good. So I just felt like that was like the kicker to the night, to just like hang loose a little bit, and felt like this was just appropriate.
Yeah, if I was going to rep a Hawaiian style shirt, because that's a little bit Weekend at Bernie's, but it's also a little bit like Grand Theft Auto. I like the darker tones. I would rep it. If it had, like some of the tones I'm out on, like it's just not my, I don't know if it's skin tone or what, but I'm not too into clothes to really know why, but I would rep that. So it's good.
Yeah. I have a yellow one that's really nice. It's like this yellow linen Hawaiian shirt. But it just doesn't go well. Like I don't know. It's something about the yellow. Like I just feel like my whole body turns into a banana, and this goes poorly. So I agree with you. The darker tones is important. Yeah,
man. Cheers to charity tonight. I want you to talk a little bit about the charity that we are fortunate enough to be able to donate to tonight.
Gosh, man. Yeah, I'm super excited about this tonight. The charity that I've chosen to sponsor, and shout out to Active Spine and Joint Center as well for sponsoring along with me this charity. But it's Special Olympics Tennessee, And I think what really, when I was thinking through of the charity I wanted to partner with tonight for our Cheers to Charity segment, Special Olympics just came to mind for a lot of reasons. But, predominantly in thinking about the ramifications that I think aren't really talked about in this COVID era that we're dealing with. One of the big things I think that's has been a discussion for us, Jason, recently with myself and you and our patients as well, is talking about what does it look like to go back to school, and what are those questions going to be. And the reality, the fact of the matter is that for the athletes in Special Olympics who are getting education through the school systems, et cetera, Special Olympics is just such a vital part of providing an outlet for just healthy activities, for promoting wellness, physical activity, and for even doing things like sports physicals, eye exams, ear exams, these other things in health as well that we don't typically think of SO as dealing with. But the reality is that the special needs community, individuals with intellectual disabilities, are honestly going to be hit hard by COVID. I think in a lot of ways that we aren't going to expect. In particular, when you look at funding for schools and things like that. So wanted to reach out and partner alongside with Special Olympics Tennessee as they really strive to continue to support the special needs community in Tennessee, especially kind of going into this school year. So that's been a big thing for me that I've kind of been really feeling like it's kind of hitting home with me a little bit over the last couple of weeks.
That's awesome, man. And we're excited to announce that Active Spine Joint Center will match that donation this evening.
Yeah. Super, super, super pumped about that. Active Spine Joint Center, obviously being the clinic that you and I work at, and just very, very grateful to be part of a clinic and a team that not only has a heart for serving the community via the means of musculoskeletal health and care, but also larger than that, of actually being a presence in the community. And that's why it's been so cool to see all the guests that we've had come on, and the various different charities that they are wanting to support. And how Active Spine Joint Center has been kind of stepping and walking alongside them in that has been really awesome.
No, it's awesome. And also, as you referenced the other docs have been on recently, I mean, we've had a few just lights out interviews recently since you've been on. And I think it's really great to be able to reflect back on just where your head goes. What are some things maybe you learned from that, or what do you think about?
Man, I mean, all the last few weeks in particular, I feel like have just been really, really awesome. With Dr. Ethan Coghill last week, the conversation that y'all had about just martial arts in general. I was a wrestler in high school. That was my main sport growing up, and hearing the perspectives of the other martial arts, I think was really, really cool. And Ethan brought something up that y'all talked about that I think was just really awesome. And I want to kind of circle back to it at some point later on tonight, is just this idea of finding something that you're passionate from a physical activity standpoint, and something that you can just do and train for life, and actually making that be part of your life, not just something that you do, but it actually becomes part of you. And it really brings meaning, I think, to physical activity and to exercise when it, you have that passion for it. And seeing his passion for that and your passion for the martial arts as well, and the experience that you've had there was really cool. And I was like, man, I just can't think about enough respect for that discipline, because it really is such a commitment and it's such a discipline. It's cool to see people just take that on and really thrive there. So
yeah, and I'll say that in my experience, after being so entrenched in martial arts for so long, it was actually really hard once you're now physically away from the studio that pretty much brought you up to really pick that next thing, because there was such an emotional wall that there was just no way that I was going to pick up at another studio. It's just where my head was at. It's where my commitment was at. So once I was too far like away from a regional perspective, it really took me a long time to find something to be excited about again. For a while, it was basketball with a group, 3 or 4 days a week. And then it was just lifting. And then it was kind of this in between time, had some kids, hung out a little bit, and then it got into the running gist. And now I'm like almost done with this 1,000K across Tennessee thing. And I'm like, what's next? I don't know. It's just not the same as that like initial love for activity, with what brought me up in the game.
Yeah, so I was actually wanting to talk to you about this, about like, I mean, obviously I've been into running for quite some time now, and it's been a relatively new thing for you, and it's been really cool to watch how you've actually gotten into it the right way and actually done the hard work of building a really, really solid base and getting after it and doing it strategically and specifically. And I'd love to hear about your experience with that and kind of what that's been like as somebody who didn't have a lot of experience running, now like trying to kind of get into this new field. Like, what have been some of the challenges? What have been some of like the cool experiences or like realizations that you've had, and just to like see what's on your mind in that process? Because it's like there's some ups and downs when you're starting out, and really it's always ups and downs, really.
Yeah. I think the first big take home is that it's an interesting perspective, because for over a decade now, have running injuries has been a big specialty of mine. So seeing those cases, seeing those tendon related cases, those are things that got me really excited early on, is to be able to help those individuals meet the goals that they wanted to, where there was something always in the way. So that led so much on this research journey and this constant strive for more sports medicine training to be better and better at handling those. So the interesting thing is that, the running community, just like any real deep community where you're around a lot of other athletes that enjoy the same discipline, there's a difference when they just like, there's this agreement that you get each other, right? Like, oh, so you run, well, I run too, so we instantly connect. And what's interesting is I never had that background. That was not something that I was into. My mom ran a bunch growing up. My grandfather, was a big half marathon guy, and but it just never was my thing. And to still be able to get so many runners better and help that community and get to see them meet their goals was always awesome. But now being able to look at all of those injuries we've seen over time biases my perspective on what building that up should look like to stay injury free. So it's probably a nod a little bit too heavy conservative. I would say that would be my biggest bias, would be to be too conservative in the progression. But at the same time, 5 weeks into doing this thing, I saw Scott Jordan sign up for the 1,000K across Tennessee and was like, I could do that. It's only 5.1 miles a day for 3 months. Okay. Yeah, I can do that. So actually it's still sort of like it's small, but then all of a sudden it is a little bit of a steep commitment. But the benefit is they do allow you to walk in that, right? So the cool part is you can jog, walk, interval that, still clock those miles.
Right.
But, one of the principles we use with like the worst tendon pain cases, which obviously but some of the listeners may not, is that up to a certain distance, we may want them to be able to walk either the distance or twice the distance before we have them jog walk it. Depending on where they're at and what their history is, there's a time that's really appropriate. So for me, it was really important to be able to walk a half marathon before running 7 or 8 miles without stopping. Yeah. So that was something that I thought was crucial that I had to be able to achieve. And once I did that, it was a lot easier to start getting the ball rolling. But I'll say the other thing is the world's really beautiful in the morning. Never experienced a 4 a.m. before. And now I do that almost every single day. So that's super awesome. And I guess the last tidbit on that would be that the heat is as miserable as every runner's ever complained in the last decade that it is. It's just that humidity when it's 99%. It's like, I'm not swimming, but it feels like it. It's brutal.
Yeah. Yeah. Gosh, I think that's really good. And one of the things that I think I've really been admiring and just like watching you go through this process is, number one, seeing like the discipline that you've had with consistency, but then also not pushing the throttle too hard, too early. And thinking about like, okay, what's the long-term goal here? Like, what am I hoping to achieve in the future long term, as opposed to kind of getting that like immediate like that instant gratification, and it's so funny. I think the more that I've been in practice and seeing these running related injuries, and we've talked about the difference between injuries that happen when you run too much, and then injuries that happen when you run too fast, right? And kind of how those are sort of on this spectrum of different types. But seeing how you've been putting up the right steps to not have that happen. I think in a world where we have everything at our fingertips, we expect that our progress should just happen so much quicker than it actually does. And the reality is that you go through a marathon training program, which is 16 weeks, right? But what that doesn't show you is the months and months before that 16-week program of actually building up to that point. And then when you actually start to think about how much time it takes to do something like that, you're looking at like, to actually do it right, almost a year. And that's so, like, when you think about it in that standpoint, it's like, oh my gosh, like, no wonder like everybody gets hurt. 90% of recreation runners get hurt every year, and it's because, it's almost always a training error in some capacity, right? Gosh, like, I am king example of someone who does not do that well. And I think you've seen that as well. And so I'm like, man, I need to be like more like Jason in this.
I think the difference is, though, is that when you've had, when you come through the early 20s or late teens and you've had that healthy, good training load consistency through your life, and you really haven't had a long off period, right? Like, you haven't had 2 years of no physical activity in that window. It's a little bit different to feel that need, like you can push your pace, because you are working on keeping some good fitness level and good conditioning all year round. Maybe it's not plyometric all the time like running would be, but it's still, you're putting in the time, you're putting in the work, so the muscles are conditioned, and then you can jump back into that habit a heck of a lot faster. But you're going to be able to just take the governor off so much faster, which is going to get you into trouble, because it's a hell of a lot of fun when you're basically my sprint for your 8-miler. At this point, being a rookie to the sport, it's not even the same. Like, my heart rate's blasting 180. Like, I feel like I'm dying if I'm trying to hold a 7-minute pace. Like, it's just not okay. It's just, I'm not there. I guess the 33 years leading up of not running apparently matters. So, like, you got to kind of do it for a while.
Yeah. So then my question is, as someone who's come into that, I grew up running, and so I don't have this perspective, but it's somebody who is entering into it, having not grown up with it. What, like, advice or bits would you have for maybe people watching, audience members who are thinking about doing that for the first time? Like, man, I've never really been a runner, but I've got all this extra free time right now because I'm working from home and all of this stuff. Like, what would be a couple of your tidbits that you would say from your personal experience would be beneficial?
I think first would be, if your goal is, if you think it's running, that's different than if it really is running. I think that's the first thing. So if they think, oh yeah, I'm going to get into running because I've got this time, let's go do it. Well, let's make sure that's not really it. It could be that you just want to be able to get physically active, get your heart rate up, get the health benefits of being active again. And we know you can do that on hills. You can walk fast enough for most people to get up to a reasonable heart rate that's going to have big change early on. Is that you don't have to have this, I have to run X number of distance right away. It's not actually appropriate. Something you and I were talking about is, because you have such a big Orange Theory background, and I recently got a heart rate monitor about 5-6 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And watching the changes just in that 5 weeks have been really dramatic. But it was really surprising early on, even though I'd already been doing it maybe 5-6 weeks, is that your heart rate will get up there pretty dadgum good into that zone 3, almost to zone 4 by just walking fast uphill. Like when you're not conditioned for it and you haven't been doing that for any length of time, you might be surprised how hard your body's actually working in that moment when you're like, it's just walking uphill, like whatever. But actually your body is working. It's getting something out of it. Where now if I walk up that hill, like I'm still zone 2 the whole time, never even get into that zone 3. So just that heart rate's way less even when I go really fast up the hill. So it's to be able to see that happen in a 6-week period is pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the other thing too is, cause I was with, Orange Theory Fitness for 5 years as a coach and seeing, one of the things that I don't think I realized before getting into that industry is actually being able to use that technology piece of the heart rate monitor and kind of tailor a workout experience around those heart rate zones. And you're absolutely right. Like it's pretty crazy to see like, oh, wow, my body's actually working pretty stinking hard right now, even if you don't realize that it is. And that was one of the things that I loved about Orange Theory and just being a coach, and then also being in healthcare, and then also in the fitness world as well, and kind of seeing how those things blend was pretty cool. Because for a general population fitness concept to be able to incorporate that technology and the heart rate based interval training piece was pretty neat, and that was eye opening, I think, for myself and a lot of other people too.
Hey, one thing that's fun about the comments right now, Alan Bickmer still made the show, even though it's past his bedtime.
Whoa,
so
Alan.
Cassie, went ahead and convinced us or said something along the lines of we would sing him a lullaby if it was actually his bedtime, but we're going to not do that. And we're going to more just drink and toast to Alan. And he hit us with a good question, though. Ready for the question?
What's that? I'm ready. Hey,
he
cheers,
said,
Alan. I'm proud of you, man.
Yeah, thanks for making the late night show, man. Didn't have to do that. He wanted to know, what do you look forward to least? And what do I look forward to least? Either long run day or speed tempo day.
Least?
Yeah, like if you had to pick, like, all right, I'm looking at my week this week. I've got 13 on Saturday, but on Wednesday, I've got, sprint repeats.
Yeah, that's a good question, Alan. So I would say specifically the workout that I look forward to the least are the Yassos, which are basically 800 repeats. So it's like an 800 repeat and then a 400 recovery, or a half mile repeat and quarter mile recovery. And the repeat that you're doing at that 800 pace is, I mean, it's hurtful. It's really, really intense. But gosh, and I love it from a training standpoint. I feel like just in terms of getting my speed up and feeling good and strong, that it's a great workout. But God, especially early on in training, like those first few weeks of doing that interval is, gosh, I just really, really dread it. It's one of those things where I feel like I need to run with somebody who's better than me to be able to like actually do it, or else I'm just gonna dog it, and I'm gonna be like, well, yeah, I didn't really quite get the paces that I wanted, but like that's good enough. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I
Rob
like to
Canopy
think I'm really
just
disciplined,
roasted
but
Alan.
the reality is I'm not. What?
So
Allison
Rob Canopy, no, Rob just roasted
nice.
Alan. He said,
Okay.
Corey Campbell just joined the show. So what's up, Corey?
Nice. What's up, Corey?
But Alan, Rob said he couldn't believe the assisted living facility let Alan stay up this late.
Dang.
It's amazing. It's amazing. Man, well, let's talk a little bit about, we had a really good session the other day where we were doing some training, but it really hit home because, we've got the students in the clinic right now and able to help educate them on what it's like in a sports medicine rehab clinic, where you're able to show the amount of changes and types of rehab changes you're able to make, how quickly they can be if you go if you blend the right therapies and the best science together. Yeah. And one of the things that clicked by just watching their face as we worked on getting the shoulder to turn further inward on yourself,
Mhm.
I wanted your opinion on what is that like? What's that experience like when you're able to feel those big range of motion changes for the first time? Because, we had a virtual summit that was recently for the Motion Palpation
Mhm.
Institute. We were able to record a video. And the fun thing about that is we had 2 students there. And so they were the only people available to work up that day. But we worked them up, found some deficits on one, and then we just went through, followed our systematic approach, treating the things, and saw massive range of motion changes really quickly. And they were so surprised. And what's a little different, I guess, once you've been in the game for a while, 11 years in, I expect to see these big changes quickly. I don't expect, it's just different. They're like, oh my gosh, this does happen. And then on my side, I'm like, what did you think was going to happen? Like, that's why we do what we do, is to improve that. So I wanted your
Yeah.
take on what was it like, because you had said something pretty unique about feeling that shoulder range initially and then another with the upper back. What's that like for someone that wants to understand what that
Yeah.
experience is like? Because we get to see it all the time with patients, but
Mhm.
people don't necessarily understand what that can be like.
Yeah, it's pretty wild, honestly. And being in the profession, you don't have the opportunity to get worked on yourself a ton, right? And so I think we see these changes happen with our patients so much, and you kind of almost like lose like the memory of what it feels like to actually have it like be done to you as well, and like for you to go through those brand new like, oh my gosh, I've never moved in that way before, and to have that experience. And so every time that does happen to me, it's kind of like you get like that sort of like giddy feeling of like, okay, I know that I can normally not do this, and now I'm able to do it. It's pretty crazy. And it's almost like were you around for the solar eclipse in
Oh, of
2017?
course. Yeah.
Did
Yeah,
you
of
see
course.
that? Did
Our
you get to see
daughters were
that?
there and we were working so hard to get little Ellie to keep her glasses on.
Yeah,
But then
it's
she didn't even know to look up. So it was like all for naught. We were stressing and I was missing it all. But I was like, please just keep on these things we paid 10 times too much for. And
yeah.
she was like, the ground's dark. Like she wasn't even looking up the whole time. Yeah, but that's my memory from the eclipse.
Right. Okay. So here's really the big thing that hit home was that leading up to like it's gradually getting to a place of like it's kind of getting dimmer, lights like getting grayer and all this stuff. But then all of a sudden, like the lights go out, and all of a sudden you're like, wait a second, that's the sun, but it's dark out. And there's the only way that I can explain it to people who weren't there is that it's really like there's not really a way to explain it because you've never experienced anything like that before. So you have like nothing to compare it to, right? And I use that analogy because regaining range of motion that you haven't had in years or maybe ever, okay, when you actually experience what it's like for me to be able to turn my arm in that direction and feel what like normal shoulder motion is supposed to feel like, it's like this moment of like you can't really explain what it feels like because you've just never had anything to compare it to before. You know what I mean? And I'm like,
Yeah.
well, now I want to go do a bunch of shoulder exercises. Like,
Yeah,
I'm ready to go
absolutely.
do this. Like, let's use it. Let's kind of try out some different lifts and things like that, and see if I can learn to control it better. But yeah, it's like I think without getting too, I'm sure most people won't get excited about it as I do. And in some patients, their eyes light up and they really have that. But then other times they're like, oh, like, well, cool, like my shoulder moves better now. And it's like,
Yeah.
but when you actually like understand, you're like, no, like I've never done that before. Or you have somebody, in session who has never touched their toes before, and then like you get them to touch their toes and they're like, I've never done this before. And you're like,
Yeah.
yeah, like what do you think was gonna happen?
Yeah. And I
It's
think
like
that's a big one
this is what you're
too.
here.
That one hits home so much. I don't know if it's because it's just touching your toes or if it goes back. I don't know if you had to do this. Did you have to do the sit and reach test in PE?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so
Oh
that was massively disheartening to a bunch of kids. I remember very
yeah.
distinctly the
Especially dudes.
yardstick duct
Yeah.
taped to the little milk crate. And
Yep.
then everybody's doing sit and reach on it. And then some are just burying it. Just like the kids that rep out the pull-ups that are 6. They're just
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
okay. And they're like wondering why many others are just hanging there. And they're like, I'm supposed to come up there now? Like, no.
Yeah.
But sit and reach is the same thing. But it's like, I'm not doing anything. Like, I should just be able to do that. And so I think that hits home with a lot of people that had to go through the sit and reach test. They remember, man, I couldn't even come close when I was little. And they're the ones that typically say, like, very straightforward, like, I've never touched my toes. It's like they
Right.
remember back then, like, I wasn't even close. Yeah.
Right.
But those are things where at some point, we want to keep seeing this movement revolution improve because the screening's gotten so much better medically. We can do such a
Yeah.
good job to see what are the impairments from an early time. And I think that's why I think your case was so good, because it's a perfect example of somebody that trains really hard, works out great, does a lot of the self-care pretty much as good as you can do. But even when you bring somebody that's really healthy, works really hard, does pretty much the epitome of health that you would want for somebody in their mid-20s, and then you do an assessment, there's still deficits. Well, now what happens if that runs for another 10, 20 years? Do we ever get that range? What happens with that? And that's where we don't have any of those studies that have went for a lifespan, taken 1,000
Right.
people over a 60-year window and measure just what naturally happens. We just don't have that kind of research. There's not that kind of funding or that ability to follow up. It's so hard to do. But man, we can extrapolate pretty dadgum good, in my opinion, about where that goes, because we see it all the time.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. You touched on the this idea of this part of this revolution in healthcare. Obviously you've been in practice for over 10 years and kind of seeing the progression over the last decade or more. Looking into the future, like for the next 2, 3 decades or more, like where do you see that this revolution goes? Like, where are you hoping that it goes, based on your previous experiences, and like what do you feel like is actually realistic for us to get to, particularly I guess in our realm. And when we think of, I feel like as musculoskeletal providers, we have a really important role in the life of in the health of young people as well, right? Because you have such a great opportunity to make awesome, life lasting changes in an individual. If we can get them active and moving well and healthy at a young age, we can at least hope that those things will continue on into later years. But actually, like when we're looking at the way that healthcare goes, like where do you see that go, and where do you expect it to go? It's probably a
I
big
think
question,
this,
but
no, I think it's a really good question. I think the 3 shows, if you mash those together, it sends out a bat signal so strong for this. If you take Dr.
Mhm.
Seaman's talk, if you take Scott Jordan's, and then you take, like we talked a little bit about the degenerative tendons, with Dr. Kindred, if you
Yeah.
mash those together, the big things that come together is we get an era like the COVID era where we see stratified lines of how it's affecting different age groups. And we also see, based on other health factors, what individuals are potentially at higher risk of being set up for. Plus, we
Mhm.
talk about seeing that the number 1 in 3 are pre-diabetic now. We're seeing this massive change of health going the wrong way. But
Right.
then we look at insurance companies who want to save money, who want to, I mean, that's the interesting thing about insurance, is that in a way they need a whole lot of people to pay for policies so that they can profit, but they also don't want to spend more on more issues. They want to save money where they can. Well, we now know that musculoskeletal is the number one that's overtaken everything in the last 2 years of being a massive amount of payout. And you take that, you take the chronic health issues plus the movement issues, and you take these, this is a massive piece, and it's really hard to affect in the moment. There has to be a catalyst, like Scott Jordan was saying, and like Dr. Seaman were saying, that like if something doesn't flip in their mind that I have to change, like I'm at that rock bottom, I need to do something now. If that doesn't happen, that's where we have a huge issue to affect the groups now. They have to have that internal, something wants them to change. It's a lot harder for us to will them to change. But those that want to change, they've got to have access to the right people that can help them. But the big issue is the ones on the front end, we've got to get way ahead of this from way earlier on. That's the most
Right.
important thing. We've got to movement screen them early. We've got to get into the nutrition interventions earlier. Like those are the biggest things.
Yeah, I think that's really good. I think the other thing that's where it gets even deeper is having the tools to be able to implement it, but then the logistics of like, gosh, like there just then come a slew of other whole big question marks with it, where Ethan and I were talking about this the other day about how we, the ability to be able to go to a gym and exercise is a luxury. It's like I think something that we take for granted a lot, that a lot of Americans just don't have that luxury to take an hour and a half or 2 hours several times a week, or to pay a gym membership fee or anything like that. And so adopting a lifestyle of whether it's healthy habits or even buying healthier at the grocery store, et cetera, is one of those things where like now we even get into like socioeconomic barriers with those kind of things. And so yeah, I think that like we have to be champions for bringing not only the tools but then also the solutions to being able to help as many people as humanly possible. Because I like a big passion of mine, and I know yours as well, is like I think that it is a basic human right that you should be able to move well, and that you should be able to eat well, and that you should be able to enjoy a long, fruitful life, and I think that those things are just such a big part of that. So, yeah, I think that's been something that my eyes have been open to over the last couple years is that issue that I think we're facing as well, just kind of as
Yeah.
in this era.
Yeah. Corey Campbell had made a comment that, it's this cyclical effect, but it's always, we're seeing this upward trend, and, we don't want to see that. And Donnie LaFleur had said that, he's actively in the high schools, and he's one of the great strength coaches in the high schools around here. And, he gets
Awesome.
to see this and do more movement assessment. And I think that's what it's going to take. We're going to need a ton of coaches that understand this. And, from the progressive side of understanding how we load our athletes, when we load them, those things are important, but also the movement piece. If they can't get in the positions to adapt and get stronger, then, putting them there probably isn't going to feel the best to them. So it's not going to go so well. But the reality is, you got to catch them in elementary school. That's where it needs to go. We need, just like we have, my daughter, she's going into kindergarten, and she had her kindergarten physical, and they did, the hearing test, and they do the vision test. It's like you need the movement test. And I guess at kindergarten, it's not as bad, because we have some evidence that in kindergarten is when we start seeing the ankle dorsiflexion losses because they're going to sit way more. That's where some of those older papers had shown that there's a direct correlation with sitting time in kindergarten versus how much ankle range of motion they would lose. And it's like those types of things that where the culture's at, that it's really important that if we can influence them younger, as they pull PE further and further out of schools. And then in this next couple of years, it's kind of, that's the big wrinkle. Your question, I wanted to dive in so hard because I felt like I had it mapped out pretty good how things would go. And then something like a pandemic comes in, and, who knows what that's all gonna stunt the growth of big changes that we need. So, man, I think it's one day at a time, and just have the leaders in the community. And, if you can start at the middle school level, like if that's what's the most realistic, then that's where it needs to be. But you've got to have those assessments. But man, I remember by the time I got to middle school level, I already kind of knew what I wanted, where I was going to be, how I was going to be. It's like that stuff's already ingrained. I already knew what it was like to suck the presidential fitness test. It was like, I'm going to pick something else, But then come 8th grade, I was like, I think I want to hit people. So now let's play football, And it's like I was a movement train wreck coming in there. And so, yeah. So I remember just getting destroyed by the other defensive ends at the position in 8th grade. My little 5'8" self at the time.
Yeah, I
Just
was going to ask you,
over
what were you weighing in at for
Dude, it
defensive
was
end?
awful. It was absolutely awful. I was 5'8", but that was before I leaned out heavy as like hit the big growth spurt. So I was still kind of like a little bit of a bowling ball. We've got that picture somewhere. My picture's hilarious. The pads would have fit somebody 6'5". I mean, it wasn't even close. There's no way that completely ridiculous. I was terrible. I was terrible. Feet didn't fit in the
Yeah.
cleats. It was all bad. It was all bad.
How many years did you play?
Solid one, strong one,
Okay.
full
All right.
8th grade year. Didn't miss a day.
Yeah.
I was all in. And then my buddy, I was still 5'8", and he had a full beard, and he was 6'2", and and his name was Brandon Jones. I'll never forget. And he goes, I can't even do his deep voice, but I guess his voice probably as deep as mine is now. He has a really cool pizza joint in Spring Hill, Tennessee now, actually, called Viking Pizza. But he was like, hey, Jason. He's like, you playing next year? I was like, hell no. No, I am not playing next year because me and you're the same position and you're miserable to tee into over and over again. No, I'm not doing this again. Why would I do this again? I saw no vision of like, oh, I'm going to grow. I was like, it's over. And then 2 years later, I'm taller than he is. And I was like, I didn't see that coming. I screwed up. Should have kept playing, you know?
Dang.
But
Yeah. I didn't get into football until I was a sophomore in high school, because I had a soccer background, and that was mostly like what I did growing up, and then started wrestling in high school, and didn't get into football until sophomore year. But God, was I bad. I was just like, I don't know. Like it just didn't work with me. I don't know
well,
what
I'm glad
it
you're
was.
not in the NFL. I'm glad you didn't make it. I know that sounds really selfish, but it's so much more fun hanging with you every day as opposed to you know, crushing it in the NFL. But that would be cool. But I wouldn't know you. Oh, you know what else?
Yeah.
Something funny. This is a good one for the show. I don't even know how this happened, but do you remember at North Carolina when you were running for like student body president or something? Do you remember this?
Yeah, I was running for Mr. UNC. Yeah.
Cassie,
Yeah, which
try
is
to find
basically like
this. Mr.
homecoming
UNC.
king.
Look for that
Yeah.
and put that in the comments for the peeps. I found this like 3 days ago, and I was like, "Oh, you were clean shaven, buddy. Like you got all the hair now." Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
I had
different.
a different look back then.
Matt Wagner said he's actually really proud of your facial hair, and he said that you would
thanks,
be
Matt.
proud because he's been at Orange Theory.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So fun for you, man. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Congrats. Good. And I appreciate the props.
Hey, Aaron Lee had a good question for you. This one's all you. Meal prep to increase performance. What's your favorite way to pull that off? Realistically. Let's go the financial route without like everybody knows you can LeBron James it and be ridiculous. But like what's reasonable, you know?
Yeah, really good. I mean, it ultimately comes down to, this is a sort of a cop-out answer, but finding out the quantity of meals, and I think the breakdown of your macronutrients where you feel like is your body really jives with well. I've just found over the last few years that I operate well on a relatively like low carb, a higher fat diet. It's just something that I think works well with me, like just with my eating schedule and stuff like that. Typically though, I think in a normal week, I'll do like a meat, like a modified meat and 3. So some sort of like meat-based substance, and then plants of some kind, vegetables, whether it's like broccoli and sweet potatoes and onions or something along those lines, where, you know, I do have some carbohydrates, but you know, just keeping it really heavy on the veggies side. And that's kind of been a staple for me. It's simple. It's easy. I went on a run last weekend with a guy who worked for the FDA, and he was just basically talking to me about how all of the grass-fed and organic labeling is just completely made up because he worked in the meat plants and all that. I'm like, man, I've been paying premium for grass-fed beef on purpose for like the last 4 years. And he's like, yeah, dude, it's like when you look at what goes into the grass-fed packaging, it's like, it ain't grass-fed, brother. I don't know what to tell you. That was a little discouraging.
That's hard.
So I'd say that's probably a big one for me. And then I mix it up with a variety of different, you know, meals that are along those lines. I will say that I think when I'm in the middle of training, marathon training, heavy carbohydrate intake definitely goes up. I tried to do like almost no carb, all fat, and protein in marathon training. And dude, it is like the people who are actually doing that, and doing it successfully, it's like you're part of like the 0.1% of the population who can just do that, or like you're not running very fast because
Yeah.
it's
It would just
just
take so
you
long, I
need
feel
the
like. Yeah.
yeah, you need those carbohydrates. You just really do when you're crushing it. So
Like you'd probably need a year of just mucking through it to get to the point where you feel like you're getting great runs. There was a great, I can't think of his name, but he's a PhD researcher in the ketogenic diet basically. And he was
yeah,
talking about it took him 6 to 9 months to get his first good run once he converted to purely eating less than like 50 carbs a day.
right.
And that just sounds miserable. I mean that, but depending on where you're at and what your goals are, it can be awesome. It's just you
Sure.
got to have that time. And I think if anything though, the approach, what's happened in my life the last 3 months as far as getting on that journey, it wouldn't be that bad because I don't know any different. But if you know different and you know what your time should be like and you know how you
Mhm.
feel, like it's a
Right.
big difference between if you have some carbs in you or not. Like today, we had our state board meeting and there was a court case, but we had a time off. And I was like, I just need to, like, if I'm going to run any today, I'm going to have to sprint right now. Like I can do sprints because I've got like 25 minutes, right? So went outside, but it was just, it's so much different. Even though the heat was way more miserable, it didn't feel that bad because, I'd ate a little bit earlier. But every morning when I'm out at 4:30 in the morning, it's all fasted. So
Yep.
it was
Yep.
dramatically different midday. It was like, oh, dude, I'm ready to go. And you can tell, but that's
Mm.
all the carb load, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Hmm.
think that running fasted's kind of been a cool thing that I've actually enjoyed and experimented with in the past. Just to kind of like like an added challenge, you know.
Yeah.
Scott Jordan was talking about that how a few episodes ago how he really likes to do that.
Yeah.
He was talking about running fasted for like 20 miles, and I was not about to hop on that train. Yeah,
Yeah. So
you
he's going to
won't
be
be
on in a
doing that.
few weeks and we're going to deep
Yeah,
dive one of his ultras, just all of it. And I'm telling you, that
I'm
guy's an
yeah.
animal, though. He either this is the question I'm going to ask him. He either closet trains, so like he goes on periods where he's like, oh man, I haven't ran in forever, and is actually still putting in like 80 miles a week, or he's just has such a training age that it's just felt like there for a while. He was just doing 100 milers, and
Yeah,
that's all he did. It's like you don't
yeah.
run any other time. You're
He's
just hit a hundred
he's
miler. I,
he must be made of like adamantium or something, like
yeah,
what
his bone
Wolverine's
health
made
at
out of.
this point
His
is just he's a
Yeah, and
monster.
his
Yeah,
tendons have to just be
yeah,
like steel cables. Yeah,
just
pretty insane.
the ultimate springs, just the
The
ultimate
ultimate
springs.
springs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, man. Well, think that about wraps up all the things I had. You got any last topics?
Yeah. No, I feel like that's pretty good.
No, we're really good, man. I think the big take homes from the night that I really, really enjoyed were number one, when we started talking about, um, the importance of having good conditioning through the lifespan. Find the thing that you love, that you enjoy, that you feel like you can
Right.
stick with. And it doesn't always have to be the same thing. Maybe you can't find that thing. Maybe you don't have that passion, but you can need to make a personal commitment to say, this 6 or 8 week period, this is what I'm doing. And if I don't fall in love with it, I'm fully capable and comfortable to switch. The
Yeah.
next thing that I really enjoyed about tonight was talking through the importance of being able to maintain the max range of motion that you can safely in your body, like that you're just because the training and the activities you do, those habits change you. And so you adapt to be
Mm.
better at whatever you're doing all the time. But reality is we should do our best to express ourselves the best we can through mobility and then do the things that we want to do and then maintain that. So we need to round out our training. And so if you're young, healthy, and you're losing range of motion or just feel really tight, it's worth an assessment at some point to find out what the heck's going on. If you ever need recommendations of someone to see, we can always help recommend
Totally.
individuals around the country. We have a great, great network. I think those were my biggest take homes. What were yours?
Yeah, I think a few of them. I think that you hit on a couple of them, but one being that if you're getting into something for the first time, that like the importance of fighting that urge for immediate or instant gratification and just playing the long game in something is, I think, really really crucial. And partnering with a coach or with a healthcare provider who can help guide you through those introductory phases of physical activity, I think is crucial. But then I think another thing that we were talking about and we touched on today, like you said, was like, yeah, find that thing that you do get excited about. And maybe you don't know what that is now. And so it just looks like trying some things until you feel like you did find that thing. And like you will find the one that clicks with you, whether that's like hitting it at a boutique fitness studio or like a cycle studio or something, or if it's playing pickleball, like whatever it might be that gets you really pumped, like that. It's important to maintain, I think, just that lifestyle and that lifelong trajectory of physical activity. And it starts with the kiddos now. It starts with, I think, making healthcare changes in our school systems and making those impacts on our youth at a young age, so to help carve that path for them going into the future. So
That's it, brother. Cheers.
hey, cheers, man. Thanks so much for having